could be a loss of a family pet or animal. It could be a divorce, an ending of a relationship, a friendship, the loss of a job, different things like that. So basically, we are going to have a lot of different emotions. We are going to go through a lot of different stages. And today, what I'm going to be presenting on is a specific stages of grief that I utilize and how I teach in my practice. Next slide, Travis. All righty. So understanding the stages of grief, this is me. My name is Tanija Jake. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've been a social worker for over 25 years. I've been practicing on the Navajo Nation for about 12 years now. So again, many of you know that have watched my previous presentations is that I'm a trauma-informed therapist, so that's the practice that I bring. So I currently work at Saley Health Center Counseling Services Department for the last 9 years, and so that's just kind of me in a nutshell. Next slide, please. Alrighty, so today what I'm going to be presenting are the 5 stages of grief. This is the one that I'm most familiar with. This is the one I'm most comfortable with. They have different adaptations of the stages of grief. Some have 7 to 9 stages. I stick with the 5 stages because that's what's important to me, and that's how I understand it, and this is how I explain it to others. So this was developed by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross back in 1969. She is a Swiss psychiatrist from Switzerland, female, and she developed her theory of the stages of dying when she was working with terminally ill patients in her clinic. She's very well accomplished. I loved her. She's taught over 125,000 students in death and dying courses throughout her tenure as a professor and as a professional. So one of the books that she has is on death and dying, and this has won her multiple awards and was even named Book of the Century. And Time magazine also recognized her as one of the 100 most important thinkers of the 20th century. She has also been inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. She passed away in 2004. She was actually living in Scottsdale. So she has a lot of credits to her name. She did a lot of work with the AIDS community. She did prison hospice for incarcerated individuals, and she's a big advocate and pioneer of hospice care. And then she's also worked with children who had terminal illness. So very important woman, and why I admire her a lot and follow her theories in regards to grief. So I'm just going to read the quote. Should you shield the valleys from the windstorms, you would never see the beauty of their canyons. I don't know what happened. Okay, there we go. So again, this is going to be the 5 stages of grief by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. All right, next slide. While we're waiting on the next slide, let's see. And please, if you guys are online, be interactive. Whatever you can do, give us feedback. If you have questions, if you have comments, please put them in the chats or your emoticons, emojis, your reactions would be awesome. Okay, so the 5 stages of grief, like I said, this is how I understand it. I'm going to have to take my mic with me. All right, so it's nonlinear. The stages are nonlinear, meaning that they're not like when you bake a cake or change a tire where it's like step 1, step 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you're done. It's not like that at all. It's nonlinear, so how I represent it is by a circle. And so we can start at any of these places. So that's just basically what that means, nonlinear. So it's in this way that I understand it. A lot of the times, how we go about this is most of the times we start in shock and denial, meaning that, we're surprised that it happened. When we're told, we're initially shooken by it, we're shocked by it, we don't believe it, we don't want to believe it. And then we can move anywhere in this area. We're just going to go based on this here. We can go into depression, anger, bargaining, and a lot of the times the final step of grief is acceptance. But again, that's not the final area that we go. We can bounce back to these areas. We can actually get to acceptance and come right back to shock and denial again. All right, next slide. So again, the big takeaway for today is that grief is nonlinear, meaning that it's just never ending. It's going to be a cycle. So like I said, one of the first ones that we do is shock and denial. And shock and denial, basically, for me, the way that I understand it, is that it's how we survive the loss, how we survive the initial shock of it all. When someone tells us this person is gone or you've lost this person, we go into shock, and that's our mind and body telling us or protecting us, almost like a sponge that's going to be filtering out what could happen. Because if we were to experience all the thoughts, feelings, and emotions that are associated with finding out the loss of a person, we ourselves would not survive that. So that's a big piece for shock and denial, is that it's helping us to survive that. It's helping us to actually take that stuff in. So it's almost like that filter that, just little bits and pieces are going in. So I've lost people. I've lost very significant people in my life. I've lost my maternal grandmother. I've lost an older brother. And 3 years ago, I lost a younger brother. And then more recently, I lost a coworker who I was very, very close to. So again, I also went through this. So for one of the losses, we were informed by a police officer. And I remember I was a teenager at the time. And when he told me, and it's just like, no, that's not true. That didn't happen. No, he forgot his wallet at home. His driver's license is at home. How do you know that that's him? That was part of my shock and denial. So many of you can go through that, and if you're comfortable sharing, you're able to share that. This is a place for you to process and kind of let some of those things out and to let them go. All right, next slide, please. All right, and then one of the next phases could be depression. And how I describe this and help people to understand this is a lot of the times this is the loneliness, this is the sadness that we feel. Sometimes this is the funeral, this is the family gatherings that we have, because this is telling us that life is no longer going to be the same. Basically, what's going to happen is that we are trying to figure out how to live life now. And with depression, we start to feel lonely. We start to feel the loss. We start to feel the emptiness. We begin to lose interest in a lot of the things that we had interest in before. So these are some of the things to look out for. Of course, we're going to be sad. We're going to feel lonely, all of those things. And a trigger warning, a lot of the time, some of the people that we work with, some of the people that are going through a significant loss in their life will resort to self-harm or even suicidal ideation. So we just have to look out for that. But that's part of it. This is part of the grief process. Next slide, please. All right, anger. So this one, I don't know how many of you have attended our anger management presentation, but anger is a secondary emotion. Basically, what that means is that anger is a mask that's covering up what we're really feeling. Because anger is a very easy emotion to express. If someone cuts me off on the road, I can cuss at them, flip them off, because that's an easy emotion to express. But what am I really feeling if I were to step back and think about that is that maybe I was scared, maybe I felt vulnerable, I felt like this person was going to harm me, or if I had my family in the vehicle, they would harm my family. So that's the real emotion. So with anger, in grief, how I understand it, and again, how I explain it, is that this can be a bridge from the loss to the individual. Is how do they feel? How are they expressing themselves? What is that anger? So within grief, anger helps us to kind of make sense of this. It helps us to try to understand what this grief is about. So with anger, a lot of the times I say that, we place the anger on, if a person had a terminal illness, we blame that terminal illness, F cancer or whatever it is, that drunk driver, or, this person shouldn't have been there. That's kind of part of what the anger is. If the anger can be expressed in many different ways. So, we can blame all these other things, and that's what makes us feel really upset and frustrated about the loss of life or the loss of something, whether it's a job. Even I tell people, we even go through stages of grief if we lose these things. We also go through the stages of grief. And a lot of the times when anger shows itself in grief, it's because we've come out of that shock and denial. So we're now living in reality where the loss has happened. We're realizing that this loss has happened and life has changed for us forever. Next slide, please. All right, so bargaining. I've renamed this in my practice. I call it the coulda, shoulda, wouldas in life. So within bargaining, guilt is basically its wingman. Guilt is also part of bargaining. So in bargaining, we, tend to say, if I did this, if I said this, then maybe they would still be here. With my brother, he passed away in a vehicle accident. And I always say, I should have been the driver. I should have been there. I should have gone with him. If I did, he would still be alive today. With my grandma, I have a lot of the coulda, shoulda, wouldas because I was living in a different state when she passed away. And I always think, I should have gone to visit her more. I should have been there more. We could have done this. And some of our family members have even said things like, if she was taken care of better, if this had happened, she would still be here. So it's a lot of the what ifs, or if only I had done this or said this, maybe if I just, or even I promise I will. So, sometimes that's even with the end of life stuff is, if you do this, if I do this differently, then the outcome will be different. So that's how I understand bargaining. It's our coulda, shoulda, wouldas, what should we have done? And again, guilt, is its wingman. We feel guilty about the time not spent, or maybe this is a time when families reflect on, we should have not had this fight over whatever, or, maybe a partner got upset about something. So that's kind of where bargaining comes in these stages of grief. Next slide. And then acceptance. In acceptance, I always tell my clients who come in is that it's not okay. It's not okay that this has happened. We just are learning to adjust and readjust to our new normal. What are we going to do now? And one of the big strengths that I find within acceptance is that spirituality plays a big piece in this area. So, when I'm in session with a person and we go through these stages of grief, and I ask them, okay, we finally get to the acceptance piece, and I'll ask, okay, so what does your faith tell you about your loved one who's passed away or who's departed? So there's a lot of people who believe in an afterlife. There's people who believe in reincarnation. There's people who believe that there's a different realm than what we have here. And then we also have people who state, I don't have a faith or belief in that. I don't believe that they've gone anywhere. But each person, like I said in the beginning, they grieve and they do these things in their own way and in their own time. So it's really important that we do provide that acceptance, and that eventually we will get there. We will get there. It just depends on how we go about doing that. If we have the support system, if we have a faith or spirituality, or if we have a belief that's going to allow us to believe that there is something that's going to happen after a person passes away. Next slide. I don't know if I rushed through my slides. Okay. So again, it's nonlinear. So you can start at shock and denial, you can come down to bargaining, you can actually get to acceptance here and say, yes, the person has passed away. Yes, I know that that's real. This is my new reality, my new normal. Even when you get to here with your spirituality, you have the faith, you have the belief that they're in a better place or that they've gone somewhere else, you can again come back to depression and feel sad and feel all that loneliness and emptiness. And then you can come to anger and you can be cussing out cancer or health illnesses or a drunk driver or car accident or, whatever it is, COVID-19. And then you can come back up to shock and denial and just say, I can't believe that. What happened? And again, it goes all over the place. So when I explain the grief process, the loss process, I always point to this and I say, is this how it feels? Is this what you feel like? You can answer yes or no, it's up to you. But this is what I feel like in my own grief process. This is what makes sense for me. So I can go anywhere. I can go back and forth, up and down, left to right, right to left, all those areas. And then this is what it feels like. I lost my grandma 22 years ago, and I still am shocked. My grandma used to be the one who made the cradle board bedding for the new babies. And when the new baby was born, you would bring them to grandma's house, and she would be the one to sing to them. And so for me, my children never got that, never got anything made by my grandma. But I have my own belief and I've gotten to acceptance. But, every single Christmas, every Mother's Day, every time her birthday passes, I come here and I start to think about those things. And then I also come here to anger. And then I go to bargaining, saying, what could I have done differently? I wish she was still here. I wish she was with us. I want her to be with us. But, those things are out of my control, and I can't change those things. The same things with my brother. I always wonder, I'm in constant bargaining with my brother. What would he have been like? Would he have had children? Would he have gotten married? Would I have had nephews and nieces? And, the week before he passed away, I was actually a student here. And I had gotten my Pell Grant money, and I went down to Chinle. I think Burger King was cool back then. So housing office drove us all down in that white van, took us to Burger King. And before I left, this is before cell phones, he called me and he kept saying, TJ, come over, I have your money. I had given him $10 like months prior, but for some reason, He wanted to pay me back. And I remember we were in that big old white van, and I wanted to desperately ask, can we turn in here so I can go visit my brother and collect my $10? And I never did. But, with the bargaining part, that always crosses my mind, even to this day. I lost my brother 24 years ago. And I think about it, like, what would his last words have been to me? What would he have said to me? Would we have laughed? Would we have joked? Would we have talked? So that's my constant bargaining. And I'm still doing that 24 years later. So a lot of you, I'm pretty sure, can relate. And my hope is that you're understanding that this is all normal. This is how you should feel, and these are the stages that you should be going through. And I'm not going to tell you that you have to go through each and every single one. Some of you are going to skip a lot of these. Some of you might just go from shock and denial straight to an acceptance and not feel any of these or go through any of these stages. So again, that's what it means by being non-linear. It's not 1, 2, 3, 4 and you're done. This is going to be lifelong. This is going to be forever. I'm not saying that your depression symptoms are going to be forever. Just the loss is going to be forever. Through acceptance, that's where you're going to find your coping skills, because there's no cure for grief whatsoever. You will not be cured from grief. All you're going to do is you're going to learn how to live life without the loss of a loved one, the loss of a cell phone, the loss of a job, the loss or ending of a relationship. You're just going to learn how to live without that being physically present in your life. And it's not easy. It's going to be hard. I'm not going to lie to you. It's going to be really, really hard. But I want you to know that all of this is normal. All of this you should be going through. So don't think like, oh my God, I'm crying too much. I'm still crying after 20 years. I still cry after 25 years, 24 years. I still miss my grandma. I still want her to be here. I'm still shocked that she's gone. I'm still angry at the circumstances that had her pass away. So this is all part of that process. So I kind of want to go back to depression. Can we go back to the depression, or the anger slide? Sorry, guys, going back in time here. We are confusing you guys. So within the anger model, like I said, it's a secondary emotion. So we have to process it. It's not recommended or advised that you guys suppress that anger, because that turns into other stuff. If you guys have heard my trauma-informed care speeches, within anger, we don't want that stress response, those stress hormones to be pumping for you. In angry, we want you to process those emotions. And how we process emotions, how we process anger, is that we talk about it. We try to understand it. We figure out where it comes from and why it's there. And then we find out what the underlying issue is. What is the real emotion of that anger? Alrighty. And then when we, I'm sorry, go ahead to the next slides. So does anyone have any questions, or does anyone have any comments in regards to the stages of grief, online or in the building here? No, nothing? Okay, we can go forward. So there is, okay, next one. Next. So again, big takeaway. Oh, you can go back to the previous slide. I'm going to keep talking. There is treatment for grief. So it's basically counseling and or medications. I don't promote medications. I feel like, you should be prescribed medications if you really need it. And how they prescribe them is either sedatives, antidepressants, or anti-anxiety medications. But I feel like counseling and therapy would be more beneficial because you're actually able to talk about and process a lot of these emotions, and your therapist will validate all of these things for you and normalize this because, again, it is normal. These are the stages that you should be going through. And then, so again, with the treatment, with the medications, the reason for it is we want the people to function. We have a lot of people who have experienced grief and loss, and they're not able to function. They're not even able to get up out of bed. They can't take a shower. They don't brush their teeth. They don't, they're not able to work. So with the help of medications, they're able to do those things. We want to get their level of functioning up. So that's the purpose for the medications. So again, like I said, there's coping strategies for grief. One of the things that I do is I learned how to make dough after my grandma passed away. I was a big tomboy when I was younger. So when they were teaching the girls to make bread and everywhere, I was nowhere to be found. So that's one of the things, and I took 2 teachings from my grandma, that I incorporate to this day, and that's something that I've shared with my daughter. With my brother, I drive a truck, a blue truck, because that was his favorite color. And then I also, collected some Nolan Ryan things. And then I have another younger brother that I lost, and we love boxing, so every chance I get, I watch boxing. I watch classic boxing, and I watch current boxing. And so one of the things that I do with my children is how we deal with this and how we cope with this is my brother's favorite fast food meal was chili cheese fries from A&W. So every time we see an A&W, we pull over, we have root beer floats, and we eat chili cheese fries in honor of him. So that's some of the things that I tell my patients, is what did your family member love? What was their favorite food? What was their favorite color? How can you honor them in those ways? So that's kind of how I get through that. And then I have family and friends who I reach out to and talk to that, again, normalize this and make this make sense for me. So my hope is that you guys are feeling like, whatever grief that you've experienced, that you're going through this. So like I said, even if we lose our cell phones, right? I'm going to go through shock and denial. If I lose this, I'm going to be freaking out, right? I'm going to be running up and down the hallways. I'm going to check every office. I'm going to be putting a post out on social media, trying to figure out what happened. Like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm so stupid. Where did I leave it? I had it in the restroom, blah, 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 whatever. Then I'm going to go into depression because this thing ain't cheap, right? Many of us are probably still paying for it. So I'm going to be sad. I'm going to miss my phone because this is my lifeline. You guys saw in here that this is the only way this presentation came up. And then anger, I'm going to be mad at myself. I'm going to be mad if somebody finds this and doesn't return it. Then it's going to be bargaining. Why did I take it out of my bag? I should have left it in my pocket. I never should have taken it out. And then finally acceptance to say, okay, well, it's gone. What more can I do? So again, this is not just the loss of a loved one. It covers all different types of losses in our life. But it makes the most sense. And I honestly, truly do thank Miss Elizabeth Kubler-Ross for this, because this helps me in my sessions, and it helps me because I'm able to talk to an individual in regard to where they're at in this, and then normalizing that this is part of the process. So it's going to constantly be part of the process. Next slide. All right, so the resources for you guys are basically going to be in this area. We have Chinle Service Unit. Of course, we have Fort Defiance, we have Kayenta, we have Red Mesa, Shiprock. But in Chinle Service Unit, you have Saley Health Center Counseling Services, where I'm located. You have Chinle Counseling Services. You have different providers down there as well. And then Pinyon Counseling Services. So their contact information is there if you guys want to screenshot that. Save those numbers to your phone. Those are all available. And we all do grief counseling, all of us. Next slide. So this was something that just kind of helped me, is what a privilege it is to grieve someone. It means you knew and loved. It means you knew and loved them. It means that they mattered. The world feels diminished without them because it was greater by them being here. But lucky us, the knowing and loving and mattering, those are the things that last. And that's by Maggie Smith. So for me, that kind of sums up the grief over someone, somebody, your person, your loved one, your family member. Is that. And I think I've seen different types of meme where it talks about, grieving is basically the love that's continued to be there, the love that you have for someone. So very important to realize that and acknowledge that and have gratitude for that. That's the end. I don't know if anyone has any questions or comments. If you guys could give me feedback, that would be awesome. Some areas that you liked, didn't like, you want to add to. That would be awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Yeah. Otto, for each and every one of you coming out again here. I'd just like to say thank you. And then for the people that are online and talking about the stages of grief and then also the grieving process from a Western perspective. And then also we're going to go and go ahead and introduce from a cultural perspective too as well. And Nana, thank you very much. Tanija, Jake, and also with the Daily Counseling Services. Thank you for being here, and also the team for coming out too as well. We appreciate it here at the Net College, all the people that are online too as well. Thank you for being here, and then the people that are present here too as well. And I encourage all the students that are out there, and then also community members of Daily, to come out, to join us. A lot of wonderful information that is here for you. A lot of wonderful information in regards to the stages of grieving, that grieving process, talking about also, the depression, anxiety, frustration. A lot of that information is good information. Also, from a cultural perspective, which we're going to be sharing here. And we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen with you in regards to the traditional perspective and the cultural perspective here. Let me have you guys sign in really quick before I get started while I'm introducing myself. Like I said, my name is Travis Teller. Kia aninch Tohit Lini Bashin, Totsoni Dashe, Adobelagan Dashinala. Chajin ho liede yisina sha ya kodo tahati tiendo le quite totas yedo, Jeno Trats a dasistra, Ashlish Trako tin, le goya, Ako ad a chajin Epiya ge a chajin biya ho lieh. Ado unta iya hunanjiko indischi ande asahi a je kwaya holien dischi a Ako ade yisina shakwa ke honit ish mahallon do shje hallon. Ado unda bilkhay aj la hallon. Nkhalchin da hallon lo. Sheya shalchinna ke. At ede lanj na gash ki kede shesan lo hallon. Ado yat sehli ge akon kwage ikest. Ade lo kest. Kwage ish ganege o na anishbenige kon kwage honit ko. Ado ya kwa nashnishkodan zqat. Ya latsa tata zitmo azli. Ago ye kut ye kwa at college. Mental health coordinator wal ya je kwage ish nanish insin. Ado nda ya student mental health wellness program اليا جاي كوا كنا نشتو إن دا كوا بالخاطر لنا دنا college جاي كون قلت خاكي كون كوا يا كيلي أمالي أجالي أتشيلي أمسنلي جاي كنت أخاديت آردا جاي يا بنسكيستا بجيدا جو كنت تني هوتا ناس غيكوتا إيشي بجي نهولتيو بجي نهوي ناو جو كنت بيبكا يد يا لي جنلي جو كنت أزيل جي كنت أزيل أنا دان لنجي بيبكا دول غلقي أبلغانك أجيكي جي كنت بإلني آدو أنت تسهلني قلتو زي لأن هزقا قلتو جي سيبج نهوت أجب بإلني آدو خان صودا كنت يأي ديش ديش جنات إيكي كواكي نانتيني دا كنت دا أكيد إيتكي بيشجي ياتكي أودا كنت بوهديش شجي نهويل نانيكي جو كنت بيت إيش تكيلو بناتش بكيت إيش تليش جو كنت أنيكي كو بناتشي كنت بلنديل نش أثلاتو نانتكين سلاهكي بلغانا كأتش آدو أنت نك أتش كنت بيبتشي يلتكي أكو هيان كده ديش نشكيشنا كدو إيسنول تساكي دو كدو نكيلخو نولونيكي أكوت يعني هجي دا ديسيل أكو see you all signed in. I'm gonna go ahead and have Leo. Can you sit over here and then do this one for me? Thank you. Move the slide for me. Okay, you have to go all the way onto this screen. Okay, then you just go ahead and push on the mouse. So, a brief introduction. All right. The net philosophy of the stages of grief. Go ahead and go to the next one. What is the net philosophy? What is the net perspectives, customs? What is it? So to understand the net philosophy, to understand the net culture, the net language, the net way of life, you actually have to decolonize yourself from Western paradigms, Western concepts that contain scientific ideology. Take yourself away from it. Take yourself away from all of those different scientific methods, scientific ideology, Western discoveries. Decolonize yourself for a little bit here. Let's all come together. Come join me in this hokan right here with that sand painting. Sit down with me and kind of look at it from a cultural perspective. Let's look at things from a cultural perspective. The next step consists of putting on indigenous lens. And then also, that scientific part of learning to take it out of your mind, that Western ideology. Conceptualize significance, the net philosophies. This includes indigenous knowledge and then also tribal epistemology. Conditioning yourself to the net way of life, the net knowledge and the net epistemology. Je quite a sneniki the neck at you go no the neck at you go big it or tea cut digi quite ba hot nil negi ba hot nish negi jokut I quite the neck at you go no the neck at they go what je quite a sneniki do even natural so the neck at you go big it or tea. Go to the next slide. Understanding the Dene philosophy begins with making an offering in order to receive traditional knowledge, in order to receive maybe na'antin from a na'yeje na'antin. There's na'yeje na'antin, and then there's also hojoje na'antin. So na'yeje na'antin, the protection way, usually they tell you that you have to make an offering, whether it's through making an offering through maybe prayer stones, stories, prayers. You know, those are all offerings. There's a certain prayer that has to be uttered in order to talk about a certain philosophy, a certain teaching. And through that too, there are prayer stones that are offered for certain types of teachings and then certain types of philosophy. Khatitin, corn pollen, is also offered. Sometimes even an arrowhead is offered for payment to the holy spiritual divinities, to the holy spiritual diyindana'ah. So through that offering, then you become protected. And then also you begin to learn these knowledges. And you begin to internalize it and put it into your life, put it into your teachings. So also, they say that everybody in the health field, through mental health, we always say that we're fighting with these negative divinities, these negative beings. We are all holding each other like this and trying to help one another to fight against these things that are maybe affecting or impacting one's life. So we all come together and we fight against it. Sometimes, they look at us. They look at us, whether it's maybe depression, whether it's anxiety, whether it's frustration, some type of evil, maybe in a way, a negative being is looking at us. So we as mental health practitioners or mental health professionals, we are fighting against these things daily. So when we even utter words about them, when we even talk about maybe teachings about these negative divinity or these negative, I would call them maybe negative beings. So when that happens, we have to be careful. That's why we have to, have our protector factors. We have to have our protection prayers. We have to have our protection songs. We have to make that offering in order to protect ourselves so that those negative beings will not, penetrate our lives or will not, take over our lives or even come into our... We are really vulnerable with our children too as well, so we have to protect them and we have to take care of them so we don't just... So you have to be careful with some of these things. So go to the next slide. When it comes to understanding the understanding the Dene philosophy, understanding Dene culture, Dene customs, there's this way of understanding. They call it the natural way of learning. When you come into the Hogan, you come in clockwise fashion, and that way of learning, that way of understanding is in this process too as well. So when you come from the door, it's going to be on the east side, go around the south, west, north. So when you come into the Hogan, maybe you might see something. Maybe you might see the fire. Maybe you might hear about the fire. Maybe you might hear teachings and philosophies about that fire or the fire poker or the traditional teachings of Hatkal sand painting, some sort of teaching. So through that awakening takes place within your heart, within your mind, kind of like awakening to where you become aware of it after that. And then that process, you begin to process, you begin to reflect upon it. So all this process here is what we're going to be going through today. To the next slide. The next one here we're pretty familiar with. They call it the concepts of living the everlasting beauty way of life. They call it the principles of Sa'ana. So through that, putting these concepts into your everyday life, everything you do, you first think about it. You put that thinking process there. And then you plan. You put it into you put it into your life. You live upon it. You don't just talk about it. You put that living process into it. And then that reassurance is there, assuring process. So this one is what we're going to use today too as well. Next slide. The net philosophy of the stages of grief. This philosophy is explained, during the loss of a loved one. So this philosophy is not just explained just anywhere. Like right now, there's a purpose and there's a reason why we're doing this. Because a lot of people are suffering from grief, loss of a loved one. So it is important to know that process of grieving. You go back, and remember to where maybe you might have lost a loved one. There's always that gathering of family. There's family that comes together. And then they sit down and they talk. They talk to one another. They share these processes with one another. They talk about the grieving process. They also explain in the language. The language is a lot different when they go through this process. They talk about things to where maybe the language itself, it's a lot different than your ordinary Dene language. So the language, like for an example, when you say yining, you don't hear that a lot. Or you hear chenatenzen. Or else, learning about these different significant processes that take place through grieving. The primary purpose of this philosophy is to bring healing. So when people come together and they explain, maybe grandpa, grandma, they might come to a chapter house, and maybe an old elder would come up in front of everybody, and he would talk. And there would, a loss of a loved one, maybe the people that lost a loved one, they would be sitting right there, or it might even be in a Hogan setting. And they would talk to them. They would talk to them of that process. This is what you're going to go through. These are some of the things you're going to feel. These are some of the things that you're going to have to understand. You're going to have to make sure that these things take place. If not, then this is what's going to happen. And this is how it's going to make you feel. Like I said, the language, and then also the concept surrounding these stages of grief, deeply sacred, and they also possess that power to heal. Using the language. Using the language, and then how they talk to an individual, maybe that might be going through that grieving process. Those are some of the words that they use. No, ako kwaki ye ado hajon janobe achiyati akut ashi nahas tui nhizani inda yan himma nhije dan lenigi alaj inda khaygi chukut Bebita hosni, bebita hosin. You know, the elders and then also the knowledge keepers, uncles and aunties. They're the ones, you know, when it comes time to something like this, when you're in that maybe darkness, when you don't know what to do. You know, losing a loved one is a real tough thing, losing somebody that you love. Maybe you might have known them since they were born and all these many years, all the way to when, you know, they went into the spirit world. So during that time, you grew with them together. You had that bond and you love one another, you care for one. When they leave, that process that takes place, that grieving process that takes place, sometimes it feels like numbness, darkness, you feel lost. So during that time, that's when these sacred teachings are there for you. The nek etchen antkin are there for you to understand. So the philosophy of stages of grief. The first thing, you know, within the grieving process, when they explain it, they say, when a person, you know, a loved one is lost, they say, "Bezeh chazli." So when they say, "Bezeh chazli," what does that mean? So trying to understand what that means, "Bezeh chazli," meaning that maybe they don't talk anymore. Maybe they don't express themselves anymore. There's not that expression of, you know, how they used to communicate with people. There's not that way of talking. And then another one is bekehastid. So bekehastid means that, you know, their footprint on this earth. You know, they put it everywhere where they went on earth when they were here. But when this happens, you know, the wind is going to blow that footprint away like this. And then their footprint is no longer going to be on earth. It's gone. That spiritual footprint that they were given. They call it. Those different footprint, handprint, even where they sat, you know, they put a print onto the earth. That one is going to begin to dissolve and disappear. That's what they mean by bekehastid. There's another one they say, meaning that when they come back, or when they're put into this world, when they're a child, but the chiho awego. If it's a girl or a boy, they say, came on a white stallion. Came on a blue horse. You know, female and male. And through that, you know, that understanding of they saddled up and then they went back to the spirit world on that spiritual horse. That's what they mean. And usually, you know, Grandpa says, the severity of, you know, the impact, I guess, of death depends on, you know, they call it sayaniya, when the person lives the whole capacity of their life, 102 years, maybe even longer. They lived on earth, that full capacity. They say that time, bahojon, they went back into that beauty way of teaching, that beauty way of blessing. And when they say that is it's like you celebrate their life that they lived. And there's not a lot of hurt, there's not a lot of, you know, grief that takes place, you know, when a person lives that full capacity of their life. But this one, when they say is when a person's life is cut short. It might have been in the time of conception and through prenatal. during that time, they call it a certain thing in Navajo. You know, the child, you know, didn't live the full 9 months of development, but there's that grieving that goes with it. There's that process that goes with it. And then when they're put into this world and maybe they're born, stillborn, so there's a lot of grief with that. Because you think, you know, like they had a long life to live. They had a long ways to go. There's that grief that goes with it, that process. And once, you know, maybe they're put into this world and then they make their footprint on earth, they grow and develop to a certain age, and then maybe you lose that loved one at a certain age, maybe in childhood, or even, you know, in adolescent years, you lose that child. That whole process, that grieving process, it's more severe. And then also maybe into their, you know, young adulthood, and then also into adulthood. During that time, you know, they still have a long life to live, and it was cut short. So during that time, Grandpa and Grandma say, "Ebenna epa hinne, ebenna ejay dishni and zakesi dishni, nzago ye gota lego izo hayu je no sanka je ito lishinte ado pe na ye anidi na gante." They would say that. So through that, they say that grieving process is more severe. Although from here, once they lose that loved one, when it's cut short, maybe through that's when, you know, they go through this. It doesn't have to be in this order, like TJ was saying. It doesn't have to be in this exact order. You can start from the bottom and then go up, or start in the middle. But, you know, that process here, when that happens, when you first hear it, whether it's through a phone call, whether it's somebody that comes to the home, or else, you know, you're in the hospital, you go in, and then maybe the doctor comes in with you and then tells you, they're no longer here. They're no longer here. And that shock, you're shocked, like, nope, I want to go in there. You don't believe it. You don't believe it. That disbelief. So that shock, denial, disbelief. I'm going to go look. I want to see myself. I want to see. That's when you ask that question. You know, how did it happen? What happened? Why? How? Usually some people, when they go through that stage of anger, then they begin to, maybe in a way they get angry and they don't want to talk to other people. They keep themselves away from others, or else they don't even greet other people. You know, they just walk by, have their head down. And then when people say, like, I know how you feel, you know, they always say, like, they don't know how I really feel. They don't know how I really feel. And they say that I know how you feel. They don't know, because of the hurt and the pain that it causes. So through that, loneliness, sadness, depression, yearning. So that yinich is more of that, sadness and maybe that loneliness, yinich, kind of like that hurt, that pain. Yinich bike kanjaga, hajay dishni hansakis yineske, benna do ujiyada, benina chiyando lakanda, tonded attendo bahazenda, kui jiji nanigi ilto bahazenda attan. Lego da timbaka hol ol. Khaila ben yesh ol net zinzo da hol ol. Je kota anita je yinil je yinil bik kanjaga. Je kota haje hansakis. Hot ayit na hil naile. Adon da enas den zinjele. Hopelessness, guilt, depression. Those are some of the things you feel. Maybe you might have had some type of belief, whether it was through church, whether it was through azet ben haga, whether it was through hatkhal ceremonies. Maybe you might have had some type of, belief. Maybe you might have had some type of, prayer or songs that you used to utilize. At this point in your life, you put it aside. You become hopeless. I pray for nothing. Dit shall hot eats. And yet such a sin. And Yahotishne. And Yahokut an Haranasha. Hathalanasha. Such a hotza. Yoinch nenes. It's a tetza. Genoda. Jokut J.H. Enas den zin. Chenas den zin. Jokut So when you translate that into English, or you try to translate it, che. And then najdin zen. When you translate that, you're trying to live. You're trying to live on earth. You're trying to move forward in your life, but you feel stuck. You feel stuck. You feel like you're maybe in an area where there might be that depression in your life. There might be anxiety. There might be frustration. There might be a lot of pain. So you're just in that area. So you're trying to feed yourself. You're trying to move forward in your life, but it seems like there's no path to take. You just feel like you're in a rut. To the next one. So when we look at Chenas den Zin, when you look at that, becoming stuck in the grieving process. So when this process, when you prolong it, it causes physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual illness. When you prolong this process. Some people say like, I don't want to accept my loved one that passed. I'm never going to accept that. So then grandpa and grandma, what they mean by this one is, when you go through that process and you keep going back to all these different stages of that process, whether it's anger, whether it's loneliness, whether it's hopelessness, when you're going through that process, when you're just, maybe feeling down, feeling depressed, and going back to all these different stages, bargaining, like she was saying earlier, and then going back to the beginning, or maybe shock, and then also disbelief, going through that process, and just, so many years go by. 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, you're still in that process. Maybe you're still angry. Maybe because of that, maybe something might have happened. You might have turned to something to numb that pain that's in your heart. Nain Eho, such a shin, Ado ele pinda nadan na, Ande a conanat et ande nes great. Ande hansa kist ati what you're still in that same process, even though you might utilize maybe drugs, alcohol, but when you wake up, that pain is still there. So in that process, you can cause physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual illness of some sort. It's a health risk to be in that state of mind, to keep yourself in that grieving process. So that health risk, when you hold on to things. So they say you're supposed to get rid of the clothing. There's a process to it. The reason why they tell you when maybe you're during those meetings, when you're meeting with the family, they tell you there's an elder. You can't have the pictures anymore. There's a reason for it. You can't have the clothing. Maybe the one he used to wear or she used to wear, the one she smells like. If you hang on to these things, it's going to prolong that feeling, those emotions. It's going to prolong it, and it's going to cause illness of some sort. You wash them. There's a process to cleansing yourself. There's a process to cleansing your family, cleansing your home. There's ceremonial processes to actually cleansing yourself and going through that process of healing. Seek traditional help, traditional prayer, ceremony. That's when we go into the next one here, the next process. So the next process, building confidence and self-esteem. When grandpa and grandma say, you kind of wonder, like, what does that mean? What does that mean? That means that maybe whatever that trauma informed, whatever traumatic event that took place in your life, that grieving process, your memory through that process. They say that there's going to be some times when you share tears. So that's just a natural form of relieving yourself. You're making an offering to the natural order with your tears. So when your tears come down, it's an offering, like making prayer stone offerings. You're making an offering. Your body is trying to heal itself. So what it's doing is it's making its natural offering through your tears. So through that, you replace that trauma with something that's going to empower you. Put that into your mind, something that's going to overpower those feelings, something that's going to overpower those emotions, which is going to be, maybe in a way understanding traditional processes, traditional ceremonies, traditional teachings, traditional songs. If not, then just understanding the traditional way of life. Understanding that fire is there. So let's go to the next one. Learning and understanding why grandma prays in the morning. Understanding that process of death. they talk about it. Where do they go? Where does that spirit go? East direction, west direction. Why do they use cornmeal, corn pollen in the morning? Why do they do that? That's why you get up in the morning, you pray to that early dawn spirit, to that evening twilight spirit. As long as that sun's going to come up, as long as that early dawn, that's kind of in a way of empowering yourself. Thinking about, that prayer in the morning. You see grandma right there. Making that offering. In the evening twilight, in the afternoon, blue twilight, there's all these different times throughout the day. And then this was the folding darkness, making that offering, and then understanding, the universe beyond. As long as you still exist and where you can see those things, that's something that can empower you. Taking that fresh air, looking at those stars, there's beautiful spiritual beings and divinities that exist within that darkness towards the east, south, west, and north. Just looking at them, they actually exist. Maybe you might even see one of them move up there like this. It's going to bring that healing to your heart, to your mind. Even just the cloud, the fog, the spirits. Just looking at that. The other day we had a lot of it that came around. We had that snow that came down. Within that, there's healing. Just being in the midst of it. It can empower you. It can give you that wonderful feeling. You understand those customs, you understand those philosophies. That's what they mean. So next one. Then you have your rainbow spirit, especially when you see this one, maybe off in the distance, especially the full one. When you see that full rainbow, maybe you look at it and you just kind of like have that feeling, or maybe there might be a tear that comes down. That's you know that spiritual existence here on earth, you're alive, you're well, you're okay. When you see that rainbow, those are some of the things that grandpa and grandma used to say. Next one. So they say that these are spiritual divinities, spiritual. When you just look at this picture, it can actually just heal your mind, heal your body, soul, and spirit. That's how you heal yourself, you empower yourself. Dibe khain nido le shawe shiyaj diben zil do le sho hajon hajoba khunzen diye kobe khata khonne benan zi bena hin na do le nza go na hot idole. You're going to live that everlasting life, my child. This is something that can empower your heart, your mind, your soul, your spirit. Put it into your mind, put it into into your heart. This is going to make you strong. You're going to live. You're going to thrive. You're going to empower yourself. You're going to motivate yourself. You're going to become determined, regardless of all these things that you're going through, this grief, this loss of a loved one. There's still going to be an opportunity for you to live for this person. Grandpa says, live. Maybe that person's life might have cut short. Live that full capacity of your life. Akot ape in nagi khan such a shin jokot as on wheat ehiki jokot ado kodo bahin nadol hat ishin ado yi sandigi ha ishin ado yi life in le. I would say that to you. So next one. And then also even that wind, that air spirit, maybe you might have been feeling a certain way. There was anger, there was depression, there was anxiety, there was something. But when that wind comes around, it blows it away. It erases everything, your footprint, everything. What it's going to do for you is it's going to erase all of those things, maybe blow those feelings, those emotions away from you, your body, your mind. When that wind settles, then you're going to feel a lot better. There's going to be that feeling of healing in your heart and your mind. Next one. Sacred mountains. The 6 sacred mountains. You know, just even looking at it, just even going to the mountain, to that sacred mountain, maybe even putting your footprint up there, even going maybe halfway or to the top, looking down from there, it gives you a really good feeling. When you go into the mountain, when you go into that environment, it has that healing that it has. Eda kwa yel da anle ero ta koda industry das aj hot an da na ta al jishutan be jena yo shot an sa kes ya tehna yo li jogot al to e be kha honne be etzil ado khali li da hot etle. You know, these are some of the things nal loshi. Some of these things that can actually bring that healing to your heart and your mind. Especially if you have a horse. You might, go through all these processes. You might be, impacted in a certain way. But when you go to your horse and when they cry out to you, and then maybe you saddle up, you sit on it, you ride it. It gives you a real good feeling. It empowers you. It gives you that healing. The better is it that big gashita hodat eti nal loshis an nanelt et behada honne be et zil le khajena yoshon hansa kes yat ehna yot lith ahot aye ikwaike nal loshin lenegi johot na oltse khadalt ena ot lith johot elako family Hakein lenigi ado yahamata hajeta akhishit achikombel khojelloni biljinani khalchen jokot ebe khahonne be etzil. Maybe you might have a niece or nephew. I have a 3-year-old nephew. When I see him, he really brings that good feeling to my heart and to my mind. I'm sure a lot of people are out there that are like that too. Maybe there might be a young niece, a young grandchild that might come up and say, Papa, 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 I want this. Or Uncle, Uncle, Uncle. And they might give you a kiss on the cheek. Maybe they might hold your hand. Maybe they might talk for you. Hey, don't say that to my Papa. Don't say that to my Uncle. That gives you that motivation, that empowers you, that gives you that healing. Deep nasko be na staltole. Ben nachnachen schnado schalzen shoke. Dibanan stetol, a jashe kushitil yand, shajetani, a kutante, anasko nahin schnadol, a kushitil yande, a konde ekonas nana statol. I'm gonna go ahead and be a survivor. I'm gonna, empower myself with my children, my grandchildren. Ceremonies, like I said, nahaga, hatchal, there's all different types of ceremonies. Around this time of the season, so during this time of the seasons, there's these ceremonies that we have. These sacred ceremonies, they're not even put out there. They're not on videos. Our ceremonies, I'm so grateful of that. So when you go over there early in the morning, for me, it really moves me when I see that dola'ane in the morning time, when the last dancers on a Sunday morning, they come out. That star is in the morning twilight, way up there. It's in the sky. You see that so, and then you see these sacred dancers dancing. And you hear the ground, you hear it through the ground and through the environment into the universe. You hear the song, you hear the rattles. That really brings a lot of empowerment. It brings a lot of healing to the mind, to the body, to the soul, and the spirit. Even going in there, sitting down while your hatchali is doing a sand painting, helping out, putting down some of those sacred deities in that sand painting, singing along, basket tapping, all of these different ceremonies. So that's what I have for today, for the traditional concepts of the stages of grieving. That's the biggest takeaway from today, to understand that, that grieving process is a difficult process, but there's still that wonderful healing that takes place. There's still that life to live here on earth. There's still a long ways to go. You strive, you fight. I always tell my nephews and my nieces and my grandbabies, I always tell them, you fight for your life as long as you're here. You strive, you fight every day. You do all that you can to overcome all these challenges and obstacles. Look at things in a positive way. Holy people only challenge you with what you can handle. And then when you get through these challenges, they're stepping stones. They teach you. They're all teachings. Ben nache gaat de shin's tweetjes leo, sanitjes leo, hanan tin ledo. Eben nache hat so kid the hallo, hanale kid the hallo, be nabjun tindo le, be bitch yajil kidole, jokutat, enigi it echo, inna, njano kuta, nana dole, washipe et zil, hahone, be nane katole, jokut ayek quagin hitcha si dole. That's all I have. Any questions today? Any comments? Everyone out there listening, tuning in through Zoom, thank you very much. I appreciate everything that was, taught today. I appreciate all the people that are here tuning in. Again, he didn't need all education, national transit. Dina and Tiniki, J.B. Trayahot, show, Jogut, J. show, the no sink, but not a Hanai not need all it, but not a non hit zeal all less, but not Nasco, na hunt it all less, nane cut all less. Jogut at ziliki pe, do ha honeniki pe, a hot eroles. Let's see, we have some comments. Can you read those ones? Or we have some questions. Okay, go ahead and put it back on the sign-in for them. Okay, we'll go ahead and put it back. Put this one back to the beginning. You can use the mouse on that one. And people, go ahead and sign in for us before you leave. Thank you very much. There are some brochures over there on the table. There's a Gatorade. I don't know if there's still some chips left. Thank you very much for joining us today. I don't have any comments. Or I do have comments, but no questions. Ako, thank you. Everybody have a wonderful afternoon. Enjoy your afternoon. And please sign in for me with the QR code. Sign in. All of you tuned in, sign in for me. Thank you.